My name is Emily. 3 years ago, I thought I had snagged the jackpot in love. His name was Mark. Smart, with a smile that could light up a room, and a determination in life that I mistook for passion. When he asked me to marry him, it felt like the stars had aligned. I remember the day he proposed. My best friend Sarah had liked him too. There was a tangle of feelings when he chose me. We had a fallout, Sarah and I. She couldn't understand, said he was bad news. But all I could think was, he chose me. That trumped everything else. The wedding was a blur of white and cheers. Our honeymoon, a sweet promise of life to come. But fairy tales are for storybooks, and ours turned pretty ordinary real quick. Our first morning back, Mark looked over the breakfast I made and frowned. "You call this eggs?" he said, and it stung more than I expected. "Sorry, I'll make another batch," I said, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. "It's fine. Just try to get it right next time, okay?" His voice was dismissive, and I nodded, my cheeks hot. That set the tone. Mark had an opinion on everything, my clothes, my hair, how I should speak. "You're not going out wearing that, are you?" he'd say, or, "That lipstick is too much. Wipe it off." I did. Every time. He didn't like me seeing my family too much. "We're your family now," he'd insist. And so, calls to my mom and dad dwindled. Visits home became sparse. I didn't talk about it to anyone. Everyone thought we were the perfect couple. I was good at smiling when I needed to, laughing at the right moments. Inside, I felt like I was disappearing. It wasn't all bad, or maybe I just told myself that. Mark had moments of kindness, when he'd surprise me with flowers, or take me out to a nice dinner. "For my beautiful wife," he'd say. And for a night, I could pretend we were okay. But those nights were rare. Most days, I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying not to fall. It was exhausting and lonely. So very lonely. The first year melted into the second, and the subtle jabs turned into something more persistent. Mark's criticism became a daily soundtrack. It was about everything, from the way I dressed to how I managed the house. "Is this how you plan to keep the house? It's a mess." Mark's voice cut through the silence as he surveyed the living room. His shoes left prints on the carpet, tracking in the grime of his day. "I cleaned it this morning," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You must have brought in some dirt." He clicked his tongue. "Well, clean it up again. It reflects on you, you know." His words were like weights, and I felt myself shrinking a bit more with each one. The energetic, confident woman I was on our wedding day seemed like a stranger now. Dinners were the worst. He had something to say about every dish. "Can't you do anything right?" he'd say, pushing his plate away. "I'm trying, Mark. I followed the recipe," I'd answer, fighting back the hurt. I was trying so hard it felt like that's all I did. "You should try harder," he'd snap back. And so I did, or at least I tried to. I missed my friends, my family. I missed Sarah. But Mark had drawn a line I felt I couldn't cross. "They'll just fill your head with nonsense," he'd argue whenever I mentioned visiting my parents. "We're your family now. You need to prioritize us." One evening, when I suggested calling my parents for the holidays, he was quick to dismiss the idea. "Can't we just have one holiday by ourselves? Is that too much to ask?" It wasn't a question, though. It was a directive. And like everything else, I complied. I started to fade into the background of my own life. The laughter and warmth that used to fill me had evaporated, leaving a hollow shell moving through the days. The Emily that used to argue, that stood up for herself, had gone silent. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and hardly recognize the woman staring back at me. Where was the fire, the spark that used to define me? It had been doused by a constant drip of disapproval and disappointment. Yet, I held on to something, a sliver of hope, maybe, or just the memory of what I thought we had. I kept thinking that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But deep down, I knew I was clinging to the remnants of a dream that had lost its color a long time ago. We went to a resort for vacation, our first in a long while. Mark had been on edge about a big project at work, and I thought the time away might soften the tension. The resort was Mark's idea of unwinding, luxurious, secluded, with a view of the ocean that should have been calming. The first morning there, I woke up early, slipped out of bed, and walked onto the balcony. The ocean was beautiful, a vast stretch of blue that met the sky somewhere far off. I should have felt peace, but instead I felt the same unease I always did, wondering what the day with Mark would bring. Morning. Mark's voice came from behind me, a bit gruff, not quite awake. I turned with a smile. Morning. Look at the view, isn't it beautiful? He stepped beside me, his hand cold as it brushed mine. Yeah, it's all right. Make sure you put on sunscreen. I don't want you getting burned and complaining later. Of course, I replied, my smile fixed in place. We spent the day by the pool, Mark working on his tan, me making sure his glass was always full, his needs met. It was like being home, just with a nicer backdrop. That evening, my phone rang, a call from my Aunt Laura. My heart sank at her tone. Emily, it's Mom. She's in the hospital, heart problems. It's serious. Laura's words hit me like a truck. Oh my God, is she okay? What happened? Panic filled my voice. They're doing what they can. You should come home, Em. I promised I would and hung up. Turning to Mark, my hands shaking, I told him what happened. Your mom's in the hospital? He repeated, his frown deepening. For a second, I thought I saw anger. Yeah, I need to go home. It's her heart, I stammered, trying to keep the tears at bay. He was quiet for a moment, then, Fine, I'll book your flight. Relief flooded me. Thank you, Mark. I'll pack my bags. That was the first time in a long while he hadn't put up a fight about something that mattered to me. I should have known it was too good to be true. Rushing through the airport, heart pounding with urgency, I clung to the belief that my husband, Mark, had made the necessary arrangements for me to reach my ailing mother. As I approached the check-in counter, my hands were clammy, my throat tight with worry. The lady at the desk typed away, searching for my booking, but her puzzled look said it all before she even spoke. I'm sorry, but there's no ticket under your name, she informed me. That can't be right, I replied, my voice barely a whisper. My husband, he said he booked my flight. Please, could you check again? Despite her kind attempts, the answer remained the same. There was no ticket, no reservation, nothing. I called Mark, hoping for it to be a simple mistake, something easily fixed. But when he answered, I heard something else in his voice, a kind of mockery that I hadn't expected. Mark, the ticket, it's not here. What's happening? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. His laughter crackled through the line, harsh and unfeeling. Oh, Emily, always so naive. Did you really think I'd let you just fly away from me? My mother is sick, I said, the words heavy with a mix of fear and anger. She needs me. He scoffed. Your place is here, Emily. Not with her, not with anyone else. You didn't book the ticket on purpose? My voice was a whisper, disbelief coursing through me. No ticket, Emily, he said, his voice slurred, likely from alcohol. I needed you to learn your lesson. You don't just leave. You stay where I put you. The line went dead, and with it, a part of my hope crumbled. I stood there, in the middle of the bustling airport, feeling a deep, hollow emptiness where panic had been. Tears blurred my vision, and a sob escaped me, drawing the attention of passing travelers. I was stranded, betrayed by the man who vowed to be my partner in life. The realization that I was alone in this, that I had no one to turn to, was like a cold wave washing over me. The weight of despair settled in my chest, heavy and unmovable. It was in this moment of utter desolation, with the noise of the airport around me, that I understood the full extent of my isolation. I had put my trust in a man who found my loyalty amusing, my love a tool to be manipulated. I sat down, the cold floor offering no comfort, the reality that I would not be there for my mother crashing down on me. My phone felt like a stone in my hand, a useless connection to a world where I had no ally, no savior. It was just me and the crushing truth of my situation. Sitting on the cold, hard floor of the airport, I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold together the pieces of my breaking heart. My phone lay next to me, a reminder of the call that had stripped away the last of my hope. An elderly lady approached, her steps hesitant. "Dear, are you okay?" she asked, looking down at me with a furrowed brow. I tried to muster a smile, failed, and settled for a nod that I didn't even feel confident about. It doesn't seem like you're okay, she insisted gently, taking a seat beside me. Do you want to talk about it? So I told her. Everything. About my mother's illness, Mark's cruel trick with the ticket, and how I was supposed to be on that flight, but now couldn't because of his betrayal. She listened, her face a portrait of compassion. That's just terrible, she said when I had finished. You need to get to your mother. Family is everything. I sighed. Yes, but I can't. There's no more seats on the flight, and I can't afford a last-minute ticket. She reached for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. What if I told you that you can? I blinked, not understanding. How? She patted her purse, then pulled out a boarding pass. I have a ticket, and I want you to have it. I stared at her, stunned. I can't accept that. Your ticket? She nodded, pressing the boarding pass into my hand. I can reschedule for another day. My meeting can wait. Your mother cannot. But why would you help me? You don't even know me. She stood up, offering me a hand to pull me to my feet. Because once upon a time, someone helped me when I needed it most. Now, it's my turn to pay it forward. Tears welled up in my eyes again, this time not from despair, but from gratitude. Thank you, I whispered, the words thick in my throat. Don't mention it. Now go on. You've got a plane to catch. With her help, I stood and gathered my wits. The stranger's kindness was a balm to my aching soul. I hugged her, feeling a glimmer of hope flickering to life again. Thank you, I said again, stronger this time. Thank you so much. Go on now, she urged with a smile. And when you've sorted everything out, you pay this kindness forward to someone else who needs it. With that, I hurried towards the gate, her boarding pass clutched in my hand, her generosity propelling me forward. This stranger had given me more than a ticket. She had given me the chance to fight another day. The hospital was quiet when I arrived, the hushed tones of the night shift nurses drifting through the hall. I found my way to my mom's room, my heart thumping with a mix of fear and relief. I peeked through the door, and there she was, resting, looking peaceful. My aunt was by her side, dozing off in a chair. She stirred as I entered. Emily, you made it, she whispered, her eyes wide with surprise and concern. I nodded, my throat tight. How is she? She's stable, my aunt replied, standing up to hug me. The doctor said the operation went well. Relief washed over me, and I hugged her back, hard. Then, I moved to my mom's side, taking her hand gently in mine. She looked so fragile, hooked up to machines, yet there was a strength in her still. Sitting there, I told my aunt about everything, about Mark's cruelty, about the woman who gave me her ticket, about the lies and the manipulation. I told her how I felt so alone, and how that one act of kindness from a stranger had changed everything. You're not alone, Emily, my aunt said firmly. You have us, your family, and you did the right thing, leaving him. I was so blind, I admitted, feeling the weight of my past choices. We all make mistakes, she soothed. What matters is what you do next. And I knew what I had to do. I would start by moving out from the home I shared with Mark. The thought was scary, but also liberating. The next morning, with my aunt's help, I went back to the house. Mark wasn't there. Probably he hasn't returned from the resort yet, unaware that his world was about to change. I packed my things quickly, methodically, the adrenaline keeping my doubts at bay. This was it. I was taking control of my life again. As I zipped up the last suitcase, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Emily, where are you? He asked, his voice dripping with feigned concern. I'm leaving, Mark, I said, my voice steady. You can't just leave. We're married, he protested. That's exactly why I can leave. I won't be treated like this. Not anymore. There was silence on the other end, and then he laughed, a cold, hard sound. You'll come back. You need me. But I didn't. Not anymore. I won't, I said firmly and hung up. I left the house without looking back, my suitcases in tow, my aunt by my side. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of something new. I had clarity now, and I had a purpose. It was time to rebuild, to be the person I had lost in the shadow of my marriage. It was time to be Emily again. And yet I had to meet my husband. I couldn't run away from him all my life. We needed to talk. and we chose a small cafe near Mark's place of work for the meeting. The cafe was busy, the clatter of dishes and murmur of conversations creating a kind of cocoon around us as I sat at the table waiting for Mark. When he arrived, his presence seemed to command the space, his confidence as palpable as always. "Emily," he started, his tone attempting warmth, "I'm glad you decided to meet." I didn't stand, didn't smile. "Let's keep this short, Mark. What do you want?" He ordered coffee without asking me if I wanted anything, then turned to me with a look that used to unravel me. "Not this time." "I want you to come home," he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's not my home, not anymore," I replied. "You can't just walk away from a marriage because you're upset," he said, his voice stern now. "I can, and I am," I countered, feeling my resolve strengthen. "I deserve better than what you've given me." Mark leaned in, his eyes hard. "You'll come back, and you will apologize for the embarrassment you've caused me." I could feel the eyes of other patrons on us. I leaned in too, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I'm filing for divorce, Mark." For a moment, his facade cracked, his shock visible. Then he composed himself and chuckled dismissively. "You think you can just leave and take half of everything? You won't be able to prove anything. It's your word against mine." I pulled out my phone. "It's not just my word," I said, as I showed him the screen, filled with recorded conversations and texts, his words damning him again and again. His face paled. "You can't use that. No one will believe you." It was then that the elderly woman from the flight walked over to our table. Mark looked up, surprised, then quickly rearranged his features into a smile. "Mrs. Danvers," he greeted, standing. "What a surprise." She didn't return his smile. "Hello, Mark. Emily, dear, how are you?" I was still taken aback by her timing, by her being here, but I managed to reply, "Better now, thank you." Mrs. Danvers looked at Mark with a sort of disappointment that only someone who's seen the worst and still expected better could muster. "Mark, have you been treating Emily poorly?" His confident stance faltered. "We've had some misunderstandings, that's all." I looked Mrs. Danvers in the eye. He lied to me, manipulated me, and tried to trap me away from my sick mother. Her expression hardened. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's cruelty." She turned to Mark. "I'm disappointed in you, my best employee. Once I wanted to make you my assistant. I'll make sure you're held accountable. And Emily, you'll have a good lawyer." Mark's arrogance finally crumbled, and the realization of his situation seemed to dawn on him. As he sat back down, defeated, I knew it was over. I had won, not through revenge, but by standing up for myself and speaking the truth. "Thank you," I said to Mrs. Danvers, my voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You're welcome, dear. No one should go through what you did." I left the cafe with a sense of closure, the chapter of my life with Mark finally ending, a new, hopeful page turning. The sun felt different today, warmer, as if it knew the storm in my life had passed. I was sitting on the porch at my mom's place, a cup of tea in hand, reflecting on the whirlwind that had been my life for the past few months. That's when I saw her, my former best friend Sarah, walking up the path. She hesitated at the gate, clutching the latch like it was a lifeline. I stood up, setting my cup down with a soft clink. "Hey!" I called out, my voice steady. Sarah's eyes met mine, a mix of hope and fear in them. "Hi, Emily, can we talk?" I nodded, opening the gate for her. "Sure." We sat on the steps, the wooden planks creaking under our weight, a sound that used to accompany our giggles and secrets. "I'm sorry," Sarah blurted out, her words tumbling over each other. "For everything before. Mark. I should have never." I held up my hand, stopping her. "I'm the one who should apologize. I didn't see things clearly. You tried to warn me." "But you needed to see it for yourself," she said, understanding in her eyes. "How's your mom?" "Better, recovering," I smiled. "Thanks to you, I got there in time." Sarah reached out, her hand tentatively finding mine. "Can we start over?" I squeezed her hand back. "I'd like that." We didn't need grand gestures or flowery words. In that squeeze, years of friendship were acknowledged, the hurt began to heal, and the promise of starting anew was made. As Sarah and I chatted about everything and nothing, I realized that I had come out of this ordeal stronger. I had faced my worst fears, stood up to intimidation, and reclaimed my life. And now, I had regained a friend. Freedom wasn't just about being away from Mark. It was about owning my choices, my mistakes, and my triumphs. Forgiveness wasn't just for Sarah. It was a gift to myself, too. A release of all the anger and pain. "Yeah, it's been a ride," I said, more to myself than to her. "What's next for you?" Sarah asked, her tone soft, careful. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I'm looking forward to finding out." "And I'll be here, if you need me," she offered, a smile breaking through. "I know. Thank you," I said, my heart lighter than it had been in years. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only true friends can share, watching as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was beautiful, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The chapter of my life that included Mark was closed, but my story was far from over. It was just beginning, and this time, I was the one writing it.